All right, let's get started. It's 11 o'clock here, so.
Exactly. And welcome to this session, 10 steps to secure your Office 365 tenant. Just quick rounds of hands. How many of you guys were visiting at the Rolling session yesterday regarding securing your cloud identities with EMS? Okay.
A few of you, all right.
30%, something like that. Good?
All right. My name is Stefan, Schörling. I work at Factor. I do a lot of cloud stuff here, basically.
Yeah, and my name is Johan Dahlbom. I work for Accenture. Office 365 MVP, focusing on onboarding clients and customers to Office 365, EMS, Azure. Right, moving on.
Moving on. So, security. Is there a silver bullet? We've seen some sessions, this is going to solve all problems. And security is really about layered security, and the silver bullet is not really around. You need to think different layers, some features mitigate certain attacks and so on, so we really need to think layered here. So that's why we have 10 steps and different things to consider here. So. And a lot of customers go into the cloud and purchase it and say, oh, this is going to be really secure, but it's really a shared responsibility. It's up to you to configure your services where you can configure them correctly. If you don't do that, you can still be under attack. So you really need to consider that it's a shared responsibility. Microsoft takes care of their part, and you need to take care of your part. So.
Absolutely. And now moving on, and since this is a 30-minute session, we will continue on quite quickly. And the first step that everyone needs to do when they are moving towards any cloud-based service is to secure privileged access. I cannot stress the importance of doing that, and Ronnie pointed that out in several options yesterday as well. And the recommendations we have for you guys here is, first of all, enable MFA for all admin accounts. I don't know how many times I have said this to customers. Still, Microsoft's telemetry says that only 5% of all global admin accounts have MFA enabled, which is kind of interesting. And if you want to take that even one step further, what you can do is enable something called Privileged Identity Management. That is an Azure AD Premium P2 feature that allows you to enable just-in-time access for MFA, for privileged access as well. So you have to buy yourself 8 hours of admin access on top of the MFA requirement.
I would take that one step further. I would actually encourage you to enable MFA in all your users when they're working externally, because cloud is available everywhere. If they don't have MFA enabled when they're working externally, their credentials are going to get compromised. Microsoft is getting 50,000 accounts compromised every month in their cloud services.
And then PAD, Privileged Access Workstation. Is that something we also should think about when we are moving to the cloud?
Yeah, for sure. When you do administration, you should work on certain machines. Privileged Access Workstation is a concept from Microsoft where you do administration from secured machines. So definitely, yeah, for sure.
An important thing, and this the last thing that are often missed in the cloud world, where you actually create accounts outside of your regular lifecycle management solution, if you have an identity management on premises. Keep track of your admin accounts in the cloud environment as well. You need to have lifecycle management there, and just as you have to have it in your on-premises environment. So, very important stuff here.
Next is the password hash sync. You should absolutely sync your passwords to the cloud, or your hashes, even if you're using ADFS. It's going to give you the features of leaked credentials. So if your credentials are stolen, Microsoft is checking against that, even if you do ADFS. What you need to make sure is that your VPN is matching the email address they're using, and then you're going to get alerts if the credentials are stolen. There's other great sites out there like Have I Been Pawned and so on. It's the same functionality you get with the cloud if you enable this. So,
basically integrated in the service.
Yes,
which is
exactly.
Awesome. And third thing, disable legacy authentication. And what is legacy authentication? It's basically the old sign-in prompt that you remember, the Windows sign-in prompt, and the sign-in prompt that you use when you sign in from, for example, ActiveSync. And I recommend customers that are going to Office 365 to disable this by default. And you do it in these three steps. So first of all, you need to enable modern authentication to allow MFA to work in Skype for Business and Exchange Online. And you have the 2 links up there. I know it can be hard to see them, but we'll probably hand out the PowerPoints later. And then one thing that is often missed is to disable the legacy protocols in Exchange itself, like POP and IMAP. This is enabled by default right now because customers expect it to work. And that's why Microsoft have not chosen to disable it by default. But I highly encourage you, if you onboard to Office 365, do this from the beginning. It will make your life much easier. And then, of course, you need to create conditional access policies to support your scenarios. But Stefan will go into that later.
Sure.
Next up, shape up your tenant security. I'm saying that the tenant is not secure by default. And there is a couple of reasons to why that is the case. And there are a couple of tools in order to do that. And Ronnie showed one thing yesterday, securescore.office.com, which is a very good starting point. If you have onboarded yourself to Office 365, sign into securescore.office.com, and you will get a secure score for your Office 365 tenant. And along with that, recommendations on how to actually improve your score with different actions, even soft actions or hard actions by enabling different features in your environment. And in my environment here, I have a score of 138, and the score is compiled from different features. For example, do I have MFA enabled on my admins, on my users? Am I reviewing my log files on a regular basis, and things like that? And if we look into my score, it says 138 out of 364, which is my target score in this tenant. Still, if I look into the average score, we have the average score for my seat size is 32. So there are a lot of room for improvement here. And if I look into what actions Microsoft recommend me to do, for example, the first thing, enable MFA for global admins. And apparently I have 2 admin accounts without MFA enabled. And the other thing is, for example, client rules for forwarding, email forwarding. Do you allow your users to forward email to external email addresses? Well, it's not a very good practice to allow that, but it is enabled by default. And it can expose your data to places where you don't want it to be.
So basically you have a really good checklist here to go through, tick off and take a stance on it, what you want to do with it. So it's really good, and this should be done on a periodic basis, cycle around it and review it. So.
Exactly. And the other thing, of course, that is very relevant right now is the concept of data loss prevention. And I will not dive in very deep into this, but it gives you the possibility, for example, now when GDPR is coming the 25th of May, you have the possibility to identify personal identifiable information and take action and inform end users on, okay, now you're sending this type of information, maybe you should do it in another way, or you should use this specific tool. So that is also one thing that I highly recommend you guys to do. And Microsoft will provide templates for GDPR specifically moving forward. And then the next thing, Stefan, what's that?
An important thing here is that is a lot of forgotten about. It's the app consent. Do you allow your users to approve other apps to access their data? Do you know what those apps are doing? Just a few months ago, Kevin Mitnick did a proof of concept where he had an app which was like a spam tool. So the user gets this prompt, they press the accept button because that's what users do.
How many of you have seen this accept consent screen before?
So if you do a third-party app or anything, you want to integrate that with your tenant or your user in Azure AD, you basically get this. So this is a user who clicked on a link. It gives them what's going to happen, and then they click next, and suddenly what happens? The app actually goes in and encrypts the whole online tenant, all the information the user can access. So this was a proof of concept he did. There's a video on it, and we can share the links afterwards, but this is something you need to take control of. App consent. What does a user do? There's ways to get this. There's a really good blog article, which we will be referring to, where you can do with PowerShell and get all the apps that you have approved, users have approved, and you will see what permissions they have. We're also going to come back to that later.
Yeah, and Microsoft are looking into ways of controlling this in a better way moving forward as well, because right now the user if you can just enable it or disable it basically, or control it centrally, and then you have possibilities with third-party solutions to control it a bit better, for example, cloud app security. But now, for example...
Or even worse, if you do this as a global admin.
Yeah.
You've consented for the whole tenant.
That might be a problem. That might be a problem, for sure.
Be careful what you click for.
Yeah, but if you see something saying read and write access to your email, that should be like a warning sign, hopefully. Right, so, number 6.
Yes. So, traditionally, we've always controlled how we get access to corporate data. Like, we need to VPN in, we need to do this, and we need to do this. We check the client for compliance. In the Microsoft world, they have something called
Conditional access.
Conditional access. So that's the way to control access to the device or to the information, and this is something you need to consider. Today, 70% of the customers have this enabled, but it's really in a variant state of what they have configured. Are they forcing MFA? Are they forcing a compliant device, and so on? So this is something you need to think through. So what will be your scenario? What do you accept? Should users be able to access the information from a web cafe in Thailand, which is infected, or should they only be able to access and download data when they're on a compliant device, and so on? So this is Microsoft's framework for controlling that. How access is granted, from what location, from what device, should I force multi-factor authentication if they're on doing webmail from a non-compliant device, and so on. So this is something you need to think through from your requirements perspective. What do you require as a company? How should my data be accessed? So.
Exactly, and in the end, you have the scenarios based on what user it is, what device is accessing the device, from what app, what location, and then you have this end-to-end scenario where you actually, based on that, apply different controls, such as allow access, apply MFA, require MFA, limit access. That's something that is coming for more and more services, where you can, for example, prevent someone from download content on a SharePoint site, but you can still edit it online, which is a really neat feature. But you need to build these scenarios and understand the requirements from your business and from a security perspective.
And that also ties back to the disable the legacy protocols. This is for the new things. The only thing you can do here now is to block active sync, basically. So if you still have IMAP POP3, you're going to be able to access it. You need to think the whole scenario through. So.
That is for sure. And then, moving on to step number 7. We are good on time.
Yeah.
So now we can slow down a bit.
That's good.
Yeah. Okay. Take control of your external users. How many of you have Office 365 and allow external users to be added to your tenant without any approval at all? How many of you are reviewing your external users on a regular basis? That are questions that you need to ask yourself. And first of all, before you start to go into Office 365 and enable services such as OneDrive, Teams, etc., you need to understand, okay, what are the implications if I am enabling this external access? And for external sharing policies, it's quite difficult, to be honest, in Office 365 and Azure AD, because there are different layers where you actually can enable this. So first of all, and I will show you this, you have one global setting that says basically external sharing on or off on an Azure AD tenant level. Even if you have that, even if you have disabled that, it won't work in any of the other services. And then you have the possibility of tailor it per service and even down to per site or per team, per Office 365 group. And this is something that Microsoft are looking into, making a bit more tailored for the needs that you have. So in Azure AD right now, if you go into the Azure portal, you have settings, user settings under your directory. And first of all, here you have the thing that Stefan were talking about. Users can consent apps accessing company data on their behalf, on or off. So that is the setting that Stefan pointed out before.
And our experience is most customers haven't even looked at this.
No,
it's the default settings, and typically they're on by default. So that's something you need to review if you haven't reviewed it. So.
Exactly. And then we need to look into, okay, how should we handle our external users? And if we allow external users, should we allow them to go into our Azure Active Directory and look into, for example, browse of all our users? Because if you haven't configured this correctly, an external user can actually, via PowerShell, sign into your Azure AD tenant and enumerate all the users in your tenant. So they can basically take out the list from your tenant with all the information and metadata.
And this is something we're seeing as well in phishing attacks. The user gets phished, their credentials are stolen, you're not enforcing MFA from internet. The attackers actually use that to extract all the data. Then they have all the email addresses of your company, all the user data. So how GDPR compliant is that?
Can be debated. And as mentioned, this is not only something that you can configure from an Azure AD perspective, you can also configure it in, for example, SharePoint and other services. So if you sign into SharePoint, you can do it on a SharePoint level, on the top level, and then you can do it per site as well. So if we go into sharing in SharePoint, and I will soon, because I know you guys are not seeing anything. So these settings also needs to be looked into. And first of all, anonymous access. These anonymous links that you can share from OneDrive and from other places, should you allow them or not? These are settings that are quite obvious that in many cases needs to be changed, but many customers, when I come out and do a review on their environment, they haven't even looked into this, which is scary. So look into your requirements and what you actually want to do. And then you should run regular reviews on your external users. So run a script to check for your guest accounts and see which of these are relevant. And Microsoft are releasing services to actually do access reviews in order to clean this up in a more automated manner. But right now, we have to use scripts.
And that won't be a full governance solution. So you need to look into governing those identities if you're concerned about who is accessing what and how the life cycles are handled. What companies are accessing your data from an external perspective? Are they allowed to register with their Microsoft account, or should it be their corporate credentials and so on from the other tenants? So those are important aspects to think of. So.
For sure. Okay. And then, number 8, test your users and your environment. Microsoft announced at Ignite in September a new feature they call Attack Simulator. It was supposed to be released in preview for everyone this Monday. I had it in my tenant before, now it's removed. For some reason, they got some issues. And basically the concept of Attack Simulator is that you can run internal spear phishing campaigns, for example, to send out and teach your end users how it works. So basically you can send out phishing emails to your own users and see how many of them that are clicking on the links. And Microsoft actually ran this internally. And within Microsoft, out of 1,000 users, how many people do you think click on that link? 75%. Because they have been taught that if it's an important mail, you have to click on the link. And when you click on that link, you come to a sign-in page. Out of these 75%, how many of those do you think signed in with their corporate credentials? Any dare to guess? 3% of those. So a bit better there. When they
3%, but it only requires one identity to harvest your tenant. So.
Someone will always click on the link. Someone will always sign in, and that's the other thing. The more sign-in prompts we get on our computers, the more prone to phishing attacks we get. That is an important lesson learned. If you prompt your end users for credentials all the time, if they are attacked via a fake site, they will likely sign into that as well, because they are so used to sign in all the time. So give them a good experience with single sign-on and make sure that if something is fishy, prompt them for MFA in that specific case, but not otherwise.
Or always force them from MFA when they're working externally. So that's
On an unsecured computer, for example. So this is basically the concept where you can run both, first of all, spear phishing attacks, which is really useful. It can be legal issues to run it in different countries, but so you need to look into your policies first. And then you can also run brute force attacks on your own environment, and something that Microsoft sees a lot, password spray attacks. And the password spray attack is pretty interesting. It allows you to put in a list of passwords that are very common, and basically enumerate that through all your users and see, okay, what of our users have crappy passwords? And then you can inform them, okay, you know what? We know that you have a crappy password. Please change it to something else. So I really look forward to see this service going live. The only thing is that it requires E5, as it is right now.
exactly. That's the caveat for this one. But there are other activities you can do with this. There are like open source tools, but you need to start working with the users. You need to train them on phishing, because phishing is not going to go away. But that's something you need to start working with. So.
Yeah, and I mean, within our organization, I get these internal phishing attacks at least once a month, and which is kind of interesting. So. And this is basically how you set it up, and then you can get out reports on how it looks and who has taken what. And I had hoped to be able to demo this live for you guys, but well, it's how it is.
It is how it is.
Yes. And then we come to something that is known to be sort of the silver bullet, right, Stefan?
Yeah, sometimes it's sold as a silver bullet, all these ATP services, but still it's around layer security. ATP can do a lot to protect your devices.
And what is ATP?
It's Advanced Threat Prevention Protection. What it is, it's actually all your email that come in, scans the emails. If they have attachment, they send it to a detonation chamber in the cloud, which is actually parsing the document to see if there's any malware, macros, or any PowerShell exploits that are in the document. So if there's something they find unsafe, okay, we're going to block the document. It also does the same thing for links. So if you are getting malicious links, it's targeting the links, detonating those, and checking those to if there are any malicious.
They are running them via proxy, basically.
Yeah.
When you start them, and we will go through this and see if it is as secure as it is sold. So. I will now sign into my Office 365 tenant, and let's see if I can fire up my email here. Did it type? Come on. Okay. There we go. Let's see if it's loading in the other one. No points.
Need to turn off your cell phones. Our data plan is
yeah, exactly. Our data plan is not working. No, should be fine. So, as you can see, I have got an email from a suspicious person.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And please review this spreadsheet. And basically what happens when you run ATP is that ATP will send this attachment to a detonation chamber. That sounds very cool, right? And see if it can find any malicious code or anything in that. And as a matter of fact, Stefan is a fishy person.
From time to time.
So here you have the result for this one. Your attachments found to be unsafe. So, and this is actually unsafe. It has a PowerShell payload in it, so it will actually connect to another host from Excel if you open this one. So it is an unsafe attachment. But then again, to the point with the silver bullet. And as you guys can see, if I am copying this link, you see this is a Dropbox link, but if I copy this to Notepad, you will see that the link is much longer. So it has actually appended it, and it will open this link via Microsoft's ATP service, the proxy service. So if I'm now clicking on this link, it will go through the ATP service, but I am able to download the file now. So a pretty easy way to circumvent ATP in this specific case.
So that's why layered security is really important. Even if you protect this, you really need to protect your client as well. So if we would have had Windows Defender ATP on the client, for example, that would have detected it when it gets downloaded. So it's all about the layers, and you can't just have one layer to protect it. ATP is going to take a lot of the bad stuff away, but it's not going to take everything away. So you need to work in layers when you talk about security. That is key in all security scenarios.
For sure, for sure. And ATP actually looks into files that you have in Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, and those things nowadays as well.
It's available for the other online services like OneDrive and SharePoint. So.
Yes. So I will just go in and show you how it looks like in this specific case. So here you can see I have it for all my users in Exchange, and then I have it for SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams.
So if you would have saved that document now on a OneDrive, that service would have picked it up when
Probably.
Should do.
Yeah, it should do.
But there's always ways to circumvent it. So.
Exactly.
Like adding a password and sending the user the password and so on. So if the document is password protected.
But it's a very good service, and it gives you one additional layer of security, but it's not bulletproof.
Exactly.
Hey, I have one question.
Sure.
All right.
How about those spoofed email addresses? Do you have any experience when you are using these ATP products? We have problems with the CIO frauds and scams and those. You know.
Yeah. So so you get spoofed email address from your own domain, or
yeah.
Okay, and that is a very common issue, and there is nothing that can solve all the problems with that. But what you can do in Office 365 is to enable the standard protection that you get with this. First of all, you have to be in control of your SPF records in the DNS. You have to be in control of DMARC, DKIM, and all these layered security features for email protection. And then I have had cases with CIOs and CEOs, like you just mentioned, where we have actually created specific rules in Exchange Online. If someone is trying to say that they are these persons and they are coming from outside the organization, we should block that email or send it via review or something like that. So creating a mail flow rule is one way of solving that problem for those specific users. But if you are in control of your DNS records with SPF, DKIM, DMARC, and so on, you should be in a much better position.
And Microsoft is currently working on some improvements on there. I'm not sure if you run your Outlook account. They have just recently added a banner on top that this is a phishing mail, and this is something they're looking into roll out further. But
they actually did roll it out to Office 365, but then they pulled it back because it wasn't really 100%. Right, so there we go. And next up, the last one.
The last one, Cloud App Security. So Cloud App Security is a CASB solution, so Cloud Access Security Broker, which is actually giving insights into your O365 usage and also usage on your shadow IT. So I'm not sure if you are having issues with a lot of cloud apps, Dropbox and other services out there which you're not aware of. So what Cloud App Security can do is it actually can scan your proxy or firewall logs and detect what types of applications your users are accessing, and give you a dashboard on what apps are using, and you get a list, and the catalog is around 12 or 13,000 apps it detects, and then you can see what's being used out there in the organization. And this is actually only an E3 license for the discovery part, but if you want to take it to the next step and do control, where you do like policies, you can enforce and block users if they're sharing documents externally, or if they're sharing the document externally, you can apply a policy to apply certain classifications and encryption on the document with Azure Information Protection.
Exactly.
It also has insights on these app permissions. So there's a report where you can get all the app permissions that the users have done consent for. You will get the risk score that this is known to steal your data.
And you will see the permissions it gets as well.
Exactly. You will see the permission level, if it's a high risk, low risk, medium risk. But that is an E5 license for those parts. But Cloud App Security can give you a lot of more capabilities in controlling the usage and the policies you want to define for O365. So that's basically the things we wanted to go through with you here for the 30 minutes we
So
have.
if you do these 10 steps, you will for sure be in a better position in terms of security in your Office 365 tenant.
Exactly, and it's an ongoing procedure, so start somewhere, go through the steps, and continue evolving with it.
Exactly.
So that's all we have, so thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
very much.